The Lead. Sponsored by Lavish Boutique, Lavish Coffee, Jasper Veterinary Clinic, Jasper Bone and Joint, and Carl Cannon Chevrolet Buick GMC. Welcome to The Lead, everyone. I'm your host, Al Blanton, and today we welcome a very special guest to our show. You talk about an impressive resume. This guy served as a college basketball coach for 16 years and is now the owner of Campio Sports, based out of Ozark, Missouri. Jake Headrick, welcome.
Good to be back in Walker County today.
Man, it's good to have you here. You know, we've got a lot to talk about, but one of the first things I want to talk about, it's getting close to lunchtime, and I want to talk about Green Top BBQ. You worked there for several years. This was something that really, shaped you and who you are. Talk about your experience at Green Top growing up and how that sort of shaped your life.
Yeah, man, it's I look back and everything that I've sort of been built on started at that little restaurant on that Walker Jefferson County line, and I say that because I can meet somebody today. I was in Tupelo, Mississippi yesterday, and a guy talked about when he was a furniture guy in the 80s that he used to stop and eat at Green Top, and he was like, you can't imagine how many times I've ate at that restaurant.
Yeah.
So I say that because, my grandmother and grandfather, they own that restaurant. And so as a family, we were in that place a lot. And they were hands-on. The people from this area that went to eat there, you knew that if you went there, you were going to see a Headrick in there. And so it was a very hands-on business. And so it taught me at a young age that, when you're in charge of something or you're a part of something, you've got to try to do everything, whether it was making a barbecue sandwich or cleaning off a table or how you treated a customer. My grandmother, she was going to have some accountability, on everything, and she was going to give her opinion. And so I learned a lot from that. But also I think I learned, being at that bar, when I was 5 years old till I worked there, even my senior year of college, I would drive back and forth from Montevallo in the summer, and I would work there at night. And the relationship and people that I've got to meet, from Jasper, from Dora, from Winfield, I made so many relationships, and you meet so many people. You learn so much being there. And so, like I said, man, every day there's probably something I think about or try to do that was sort of built, and what I learned at being at that restaurant.
People came from all over to go to that restaurant, and the thing that I remember growing up is that, and you and I talked about this before we went on, was that, it was kind of the stopover when you went to the Legion Field games. If there was a game at Legion Field back when Alabama played at Legion Field, it was like almost every time we would stop at Green Top, get a burger or get, some barbecue and then head over to the game.
I think the food was obviously unreal. Even today, I had a sandwich a few weeks ago, and I was like, man, almost forgot how good it was.
Yeah.
But I think even as good as the food was, people would come in there because of an experience.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you're looking around, and you've got a lawyer, a banker, a guy working in the coal mines.
Guy with the trucker hat,
somebody working a car wash, and they're all just there interacting in that moment. And I can even visualize now, it might be a preacher, and he's got cigarette smoke flying in his face. And for some reason, everybody's just in there having a great time and a great experience. And a week later, it's the same people stopping back through, like you said, if they're headed to Birmingham for work. And obviously a lot's changed, with the highway and stuff. But I remember all those memories, and it was pretty unique, the stuff you would see in there.
We got a lot more to talk about, but before we get going with that, I want to talk about your favorite dish at Green Top. What's your go-to order?
The thing I learned was that on that meat, when you cook that meat, that the flavor is on the outside.
Yeah.
So, they would do it a lot of different ways where they'd do inside chop, mixed chop, outside chop. And so even today when I order something from a restaurant, I ask the people at the restaurant, I said, what would you order? Because a lot of times those people that work at a restaurant know what's best.
Yeah.
And so for me, I like the outside chop. You get that out. It's a little crunchy and stuff. But man, when you talk about flavor, man, it is good stuff.
Yeah. Now you grew up in Dora. You finished high school at Hamilton High School. You ended up playing a couple years at Bevel State, and then you went to Montevallo. What were some things that you learned about coaching from those experiences?
Yeah, so we moved to Hamilton when I was in 8th grade. My dad was a pastor. So, when you grow up somewhere and you move when you're 14 years old, I mean, we left a lot of really good friends down here. So the move was hard. So what I learned when I went to Hamilton was, you're starting over. And so it's almost like when you go to college as a player, when you go there, you got to fight for your position. And so I remember getting to 8th grade at Hamilton, and they're like, hey, you're coming off the bench in basketball. You're coming off the bench in baseball, just because all these other people had established their positions. And I was like, man, I better get to work because I got to be a lot better than all these people. And that's one thing I look back. I was in the gym. They had a rec center in Hamilton. And every day at school at 3 o'clock, I was in that gym for 2 hours. But I think a lot of that work ethic we talked about just sort of went up back to how I was raised. But, like you said, when I went to play college basketball, I was never intimidated. I probably should have been at times. And obviously started my career here at Bevel, which, looking back, might have been two of the greatest years of my life, just socially, the friends I met, the relationships and stuff. And then that eventually led me to going to Montevallo and finish my last 2 years there as a player.
I know at Bevel your coaches were Ott Knight and Chris Trawick. Who was your coach at Hamilton and also at Montevallo?
Yeah, so at Hamilton High School, it was Blaine Hathcock.
Okay.
And then, like you said, then I came to play for Coach Knight. Coach Knight gave me a chance. It wasn't like everybody was beating my doors down to come play basketball. I think I had maybe 2 to 3 scholarship offers, and I'm sure he probably thought he was going to get some free Green Top BBQ if he signed me. Looking back, knowing how the world works now.
That's always a perk.
And hopefully he did. So that definitely didn't hurt things. And then after that, I played for Coach Trawick, and then after that, went down to Montevallo. And so Danny Young was my head coach there, who's now an assistant coach at Samford University.
Yeah, and he was the head coach when I was at Bevel State. I remember Coach Young, and had a lot of success there.
Oh, really good coach. It was a unique situation because my wife, her uncle was actually the head coach there before we got there, and they made a change with the situation there. So we came in with Coach Young, and I think they had won 4 or 5 games the year before that, and we ended up winning, I think, 23 games that first year and winning a conference championship. And we won the conference championship both years I was there. And then went on my following year, I was a GA, made it the Elite 8. So my experience at Montevallo was incredible.
Our paths first crossed really when you were the assistant coach at Chipola College in Marianna, Florida, and I was a head coach at Bevel, and you later became the head coach at Chipola. But for those who don't understand, tell us a little bit about the nature of junior college basketball, particularly at that level, and just the pressure and the atmosphere that was at Chipola during those years.
Yeah, it's funny. I look back, my coaching career is over, and I look back at my most enjoyable times, the time of my career that I enjoyed coaching the most was at the junior college level. And people always ask me why, and I said, and you did it, so and I'm like, there's a lot of kids that come there, they're obviously there for different reasons. At Chipola, they were not there because they didn't have the talent.
Right.
Most of them were there because of academic stuff. Maybe they had an issue. But I said the thing that I enjoyed was, in today's transfer portal, kids are going to be there 1 or 2 years anyways. You never know what's going to happen. But at Chipola, those guys did not know what their next opportunity was going to be when they left there. So the way those guys would work every day to try to better themselves for their future was just incredible. And I've got stories for days, but like you said, it is when you talk about junior college basketball, it's one of the top 2-3 programs in the country. And so the talent, the tradition they had come through that place, it was amazing. And, just getting the chance. I was 26 years old when I got that head coaching job. So it was funny because when they offered me the job, I was like, man, I don't know if I'm ready for this.
Yeah.
And I talked to a few friends in the business, and they're like, you can't turn down the opportunity to be the coach at Chipola. Yeah. And I told you this earlier. The guy that I took over for, he did one of the best jobs that's ever been done at the junior college level. He went 100, and I'll never forget, he went 169-12. So I took over for a guy.
And that's Coach Heyer?
Greg Heyer, yeah. He lost 12 games in 5 years. And I remember we won the Panhandle Championship one year and went 25-6, and I'm walking around town and I'm feeling like I'm going to be the next Billy Donovan because I'm 27 years old. And a fan says, "Coach, are we going to be a little better next year?" And I'm sitting there thinking, man, I better get out of here.
Yeah.
That's about as good as I can do.
Yeah. Well, when you talk about great junior college programs, Three Rivers, Chipola, Okaloosa Walton, and when I was playing for Walker College, I mean, those were the teams that Coach Clem would talk about, and those were the top programs. And I don't think your everyday person really understands how good a basketball that is.
No doubt. And it's funny because the people at Chipola, they knew about Walker College back in the day. And so when I would tell people, hey, I'm from Walker County, they would identify that with Walker College because, like you said, Walker College was a national powerhouse in basketball at the time. And so the people from Chipola told me when they would pass through, when they would go from Marietta, Florida to Hutchinson, Kansas, a couple times Coach Clem and his group jumped on the bus with them. That way they didn't have to take two buses out there. So obviously a lot has changed, but it's amazing. We talk about how all these connections back to Walker County and stuff, and that's another example of that.
And you and I are both out of it. I mean, we're former coaches, and now we're doing other things, and our life is different. But, what do you miss the most about junior college basketball? Yeah, and I'll tell you what I miss in just a second. But
I think the thing that I miss the most is, is just the staff, being around the people you work with, and at that time I had assistant coaches making $15,000, and so just like the players were working trying to get out of there, so were the coaches, and so. When people say sometimes there's beauty in the struggle, I look back and I think there really was, because I look back and that might have been the time where, financially it might have been as rough as I'd had in my life. But looking back, it was almost the most enjoyable too, because same way the players were working trying to get out of there, the assistant coach was working trying to get there, and as the head coach, those guys are working trying to move in. And they've had some great head coaches. Kermit Davis, who was the head coach at Ole Miss, he was the head coach at Chipola. Chris Jans, who was the head coach at Mississippi State now, he coached at Chipola. So not only have they had great players come through that place, they've had great coaches also.
I miss teaching the game. I love teaching the game to the kids. But, junior college is different because you're on the bus a lot. And I loved loading that bus up. And I don't know if you felt that way or not, but I mean, I just loved driving up to Three Rivers or driving down. And we played Itawamba, we played Three Rivers, we played Chipola, and I loved loading that bus up and going to Sneed and going to Gadsden. And, to me, that was one of the most fun things about junior college basketball.
You'll laugh at this because you'll relate to this. My wife's always like, how can you go to sleep? How can you get in the bed and go to sleep in 1 minute? She'll lay there, her brain, it'll take her 30 minutes to go to sleep. And I said, I was on a bus for about 25 straight years of my life. Yeah. And when you're on that bus, you better learn how to go to sleep, and that's something I laugh about, because you talk about that trip from here to Three Rivers. I mean, that's a long trip. And, if you can't get on that bus and make yourself go to sleep, you're going to be sitting in there trying to, just thinking, would somebody hurry up and get us there, know? But, hey, it's a lot different when you can go to sleep and you wake up and you're like, we're here. It's time to get ready to play this game tomorrow.
And then you go and you get your brains beat in by 30, So, I mean, it's just part of being a coach.
Hey, and the other thing we don't talk about is, hey, when I was a player, we were doing it. And so, hey, there was nights where you were going to get back on that bus at 4 o'clock.
Oh, yeah.
And that coach expected you to be at class the next day at 8 o'clock. Yeah. And so, you better get some sleep, because when you get back, it was almost time to go to class a lot of times. And I look back and I'm like, man, that's another thing about junior college basketball. I mean, it was a grind is what it was. Absolutely. A grind.
Now, after Chipola, you ended up being an assistant coach at Ole Miss under Coach Andy Kennedy, who's now at UAB. And what were some challenges in that role that might not have existed at Chipola? What was the difference between those two?
Yeah, I laugh because when I left Chipola and went to Ole Miss, the first time the Coach Mike White was on our staff. Coach Mike White's now the head coach at Georgia. And he said, hey, would you go by the office? He's like, we need some DVD players. And so I go to Walmart. I had a purchase card, junior college level. I don't know if the school gave us a credit card to go buy a DVD player. I had to pray to buy it out of pocket. So I go and I come back and I've got one DVD player. And he was like, why didn't you get one for everybody? And I was like, well,
Right.
And so it hit me at that moment. I'm like, hey, at this level, we have as much money as you want to have. And so we talked about that. You know, you go from riding on a bus everywhere to on a charter flight where you just pull, you know, you get on the bus, you pull up your plane off the airport, everybody gets off the plane, you fly to Kentucky, play the game the next day, game's over, 2 hours, you're back in your bed because you're on a private plane. And, you know, pre-game meal, you know, what were you guys eating at Bevel when you were coaching, you know?
Sandwiches or something like that.
Sandwiches, you know, these guys in the SEC, they were eating filet mignon, you know, 2 to 3 pieces. And, you know, by about mid-season, they're like, oh, this isn't good. We need some better food. And I'm sitting there thinking like, these guys I just coached the last few years, they would kill to have what you guys are having. But I think the money is just so different. And that's, as we get in this, that's sort of where we're at now in college athletics, is the money has just gotten so big at that high level of college athletics.
What was your favorite venue what venue impressed you more than any? Rupp Arena? Was it someplace else that you played in? You
know, when we went to Rupp Arena that year. Rupp is an awesome place. Like when you walk out there, you can feel the tradition in it. But their fans aren't very loud. When you go to Arkansas, to Fayetteville, Arkansas, I remember we got down 18-0 to start that game, and it seemed like I was like, man, we might not score in here tonight. And I mean, that thing got away. I was like, we just came up here to get down 8-0 the first 3 minutes. And so
you feel like that's more of a hostile environment.
They are obnoxious. They are on you. And I mean, the Kentucky fans, they're just fans. They're basketball fans.
Alabama fans are kind of like that.
It
can get, I mean, you can have 101 in Bryant-Denny and it can be quiet.
No doubt, no doubt. They have an expectation the same way as now. Here's what I'll say about the Alabama and the Kentucky fans. We went to the SEC tournament this year as a family, and I had my 2 kids, 7 and 5, or 6 and 4 at the time. My wife, she was sitting by me, and Kentucky was getting beat in that SEC tournament. And the stuff that those fans were yelling out their mouth, you know, I look and my wife's got probably like the Alabama fans when it's college football playoff time. They sort of get bored with the regular season because they're so used to going to the postseason. But when that comes around, they're amped up and ready to go.
Give me one more. You talked about Rupp. You talked about Bud Walton. What was another one that you liked?
Just the coolest experience I've ever been to is Madison Square Garden. New York, you know, we live in Alabama. It's football country. The people in New York, they love basketball. And so when you walk into that historic arena, Madison Square Garden, and you're looking around the court and you're seeing people from Saturday Night Live and people you see on TV, and they're just sort of sitting 2 seats away from you, going crazy watching the basketball game. There is nothing like Madison Square Garden. So I would tell people, you know, man, if you could ever go to a New York Knicks game, any game that is played in Madison Square Garden will be an unforgettable moment because those people rally around it.
Yeah. I want to talk about some players that you've coached, and 2 of the names that come to mind are JaMychal Green, Eric Bledsoe. What was different about those guys that you noticed that led them to have the success that they had in the NBA?
Yeah, you know, I tell people this all the time. I think when people use that word pro, whether you be an NFL player, a Major League Baseball player, there's stuff, and I think this is me as a parent, something that I'm starting to realize is like, you know, parents are really into sports, obviously, these days. Youth sports is a business. It was not a business when we came up. But I'm like, these guys like Eric Bledsoe and JaMychal Green, it has nothing to do with how many times they worked out a day or how many times they worked out a week because of who they are. These guys were freaks. Like, you know, JaMychal Green, when he played a high school basketball game, he was going to have more dunks in a game than most people have in their 4-year career. Same with Eric Bledsoe. I mean, Eric Bledsoe, when he walked in, he didn't even lift weights, but when he took his shirt off, he looked like an NFL running back. And that's what I tell people. I'm like, these pro guys, and even being at Chipola, we had a ton of Major League Baseball players come through there. And I watched these baseball players, a lot of these baseball players at Chipola, they were better basketball players than they were baseball. I shouldn't say that. They could have played high-level basketball. And one of the guys, Patrick Corbin, ended up being a Major League Baseball pitcher, pitched in the World Series. And I tried to get Patrick Corbin to come play basketball. Well, he knew he was going to be a first-round draft pick. Because I say that, like Eric Bledsoe, J. Michael Green, Patrick Corbin, yes, they all worked hard, but they also had a lot of God-given stuff that you just got to be born with these days.
Well, I mean, you can probably relate to this. The amount of work that I put in to be good, and I wasn't even close to being able to play at Division I.
No doubt.
I mean, you know, and you got to have God. There's got to be God-given ability there too.
No doubt.
And so that's part of it.
You know, something that I learned in coaching. A lot of people are right. That's a good thing. You watch the NBA draft next week. You go watch these players that get drafted, and you look at their mothers on draft night.
Yeah.
Most of these mothers are going to be 6'3", 6'4" in height.
Yeah.
So my wife, she's 5 foot tall.
Yeah.
So for me to think my son's going to be getting his name called on the NBA draft, I'm actually pushing for soccer right now. That's what I'm pushing.
Look,
for.
I couldn't jump. So I mean, like, you know, was I supposed to go to the NBA? No. I mean, you know, so a lot of that has to do with just, you know, God-given ability. But, you know, we need to keep moving on here. But you served as an assistant at Samford and then later at Missouri State. What do you remember from those experiences?
You know, Samford's an awesome university.
Yeah.
I would want my kids to go to Samford. I tell people, like, Samford's a place for people that want to be successful in life. And I'm sure you've met probably a lot of people from this area that's went to school there. It is a place, I used to tell people when I recruited, like, don't come here if you don't want to be successful or you don't want to go to class, you know, because this just ain't the place for you. So of all the schools I coached at, the guys that I probably have the best relationships with today are the guys that played for me at Samford. And a lot of those guys have been very, very successful away from basketball. And Missouri State was an awesome place. Springfield, Missouri, they love basketball there. So if you played a game in November on opening night, they were going to try to put 6,000, 7,000 people in the gym that night to come support you. And so it was an awesome place. It was in the Missouri Valley Conference,
Missouri Valley,
which is a big-time basketball league.
Yeah.
Great coaching. I mean, great coaching up there.
Yeah. Let's talk Campio sports. This is a very unique venture. Tell us about the scope of what y'all doing. I'm just super impressed with what you're doing, man.
Yeah.
I'm excited to talk about it. Tell us a little bit about Campio sports.
It's so cool, you know, and a lot of this came from my wife. So when I got out of coaching in 2019, I tell people, coaches, they don't realize how hard the business world is. That's what I've learned. And so when I got out, my wife was like, take you 5-6 months off and sort of clear your mind. You know, you're done with coaching. So I cleared my mind. I started just learning. You know, I get all these calls like, hey, you want to come sell insurance first you come in? I'm like, listen, I don't know if I can pass the test to do that first off. But, you know, number one, I didn't want to take a test either. But she was like, before you go work for somebody, try to start your own little business up. And she was like, if that don't work out, you can always go work for somebody. And so I started thinking about some stuff that I had seen, and I realized, like we said, how competitive the business world is. And so I started thinking about, okay, what's some things that I've seen that maybe not many people are doing, but some things that I thought was really good. So when I was at Samford had a golf tournament fundraiser, and it had raised a lot of money. I mean, probably $200,000 to $300,000 in net for the school. And I was like, there's more of a need for that out here with these college programs. You know, most people do a golf tournament, you know, they're making $30,000, $40,000, which, hey, that's great. But Samford had another level to that. And so my buddy had ran the tournament. I got with him. I was like, you mind giving me the ins and outs? I told him about what I was trying to do. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to take this golf idea and I'm going to go do it for these college coaches that I've built these relationships with the last 16 years. The last thing I wanted to do was look back and say, man, I wasted these 16 years of coaching. Let me at least try to put these relationships to use. And so next thing you know, I start hitting these coaches up. They thought I was crazy at first. I'm like, hey, man, I got a golf business I've started up. What do you think about me doing a golf tournament for you? And so everybody was talking to me about it. Everybody was sort of listening. And so Houston men's basketball, they were the first ones that were like, hey, we want you to do a golf tournament for us. Well, at the time, NIL was new. So I didn't even know about NIL other than just what you'd heard. So there was a guy that I went to Montevallo with, Jim Cavall. You might have ran across Jim across your way. So Jim lives in Birmingham. He was one of the first people into the NIL space. He's on the Feinbaum show a lot. But I asked him, I said, man, what do you think about me doing these golf tournaments for NIL? And he was like, man, I think it's a no-brainer. And so I called the Houston guys back, and I was like, you know, let's look at doing this for NIL. And so, man, we go do this golf tournament for them, and it was incredible. And there are people, I tell people the one thing I've learned is every state, every situation is different. But at every place, people want to help these kids. People are attracted to the kids.
Yeah.
So we said, what can we name this thing? And so we said FORE, F-O-R-E, for the Players Classic. So it had the golf feel, but people also knew it was for the players. But the most important thing was having the players there for the day. Because I tell people, you never get to be around these kids outside of a football field or a basketball gym or a softball field. And I say softball because I did Oklahoma softball this past year, and they're the 3-time national champions, now 4-time. But Houston was my first client. And, sometimes if you get the right client the first time, everybody else wants to do it, and that's just sort of what happened.
Yeah, and y'all take care of everything. I mean, top to bottom, you go out and sell it.
Oh, we do it. It's one of those things where all we need is the commitment from the school saying they want to do it. And then once that happens, we build them a website. We build their decks, their sponsorship decks, their sales deck. We'll get a group of people in town of 4 to 5 people that are really connected in the community that wants to help make sure this event's a success. And then, like you said, we do everything. And these are high-level tournaments. I mean, we've done anything from $4,000 to a team to a lot of them are $10,000 a team to play in them. So, you know what? You do the math on that. You go get 22 teams to pay $10,000 a piece to do that. And people are like, man, who would do that? Well, guess what? Some of these places, they will, and they have. And, and that's allowed us to have some great success being able to pull that off. But, it's to the point now where I even tell these coaches, they're like, what's important on this? And I say, well, I want you guys to be a little bit involved because it's amazing. If you're a Houston fan or hey, if Alabama football's having a golf tournament and Nick Saban called you, it's going to be a little harder for you to tell him no than it is to tell Jake Headrick no.
Yeah.
And so we all work together. At the end of the day, I tell people, at the end of the day, it's about that pot of money being as big as it can be.
Yeah.
But also, going back to the restaurant days, my number one goal is when that event's over is to have 0 complaints. Because in year 2, we don't even want to have to do a sales side of things. It's about retention. And so we try to do everything in a first-class manner, and we try to make it where everybody that comes there leaves away and they say, okay, when's the next one, And that's been good.
And you mentioned Houston and Oklahoma, but I mean, this hasn't been relegated to the Southwest and the Midwest. I mean, you've done it all over the country.
Oh, I was thinking about it this morning. I mean, I'm doing Boston College this year. I'm doing Hawaii. I did Rhode Island last year. I did Arizona 2 years ago. I mean, we have been going everywhere. It's funny you say that because I was thinking this morning, I was like, man, I think we're probably going to be, after this summer's over, this is year 3 for us. I think we're probably going to have hit 20 states, 20 different states doing these golf tournaments and stuff. So it's been unique. I don't tell a lot of people. It's not like I got 10 people out here working for me either. It's me and a couple buddies will help me that have other full-time jobs. But I do think we're building something great, and I'm excited. I love doing it. That's the most important thing about what I do is I've loved doing this. And so, did I ever think I'd be putting on golf tournaments after? No, but it's been a cool business, and I think the reason is just like the restaurant. When people walk away from that thing, the same way when they ate a Green Top BBQ, they were pretty happy and come back with their experience. The golf tournament's been the same way. People want to come back and do it again.
Yeah. What are your favorite courses that you've been to? And you've been around a lot of coaches.
Yeah.
Who are some, 2-part question, what are your favorite courses, and who are some guys that, big name coaches that you particularly like? Yeah,
it's funny. I tell people, like, I would be such a better coach now since I've been out of it and got to step away and see, I've got to observe some great head coaches like Kelvin Sampson at Houston. He is one of the best to do it. And at Houston, I think they've been to the Sweet 16, Elite 8, 2 or 3 out of the last 4 or 5 years. Watching Bill Self interact at Kansas. Bill Self might be the best to do it. Randy Bennett is a name at St. Mary's. I've worked with St. Mary's now 3 years, and I say that because we did St. Mary's' golf tournament at Spanish Bay, which a lot of people know that's at Pebble Beach. And man, that was a place, like when you step on that green, you're like tiptoeing around there trying not to mess that thing up, You
get some good perks out of this too.
Oh, yeah. No, but here's what I'll say is everybody's like, you get to play some nice courses, don't you?
Yeah.
And I said, here's the truth is, I don't, because when people are paying $10,000 to play in a golf tournament at Spanish Bay, you're sitting there that day before just praying everything goes right.
Yeah.
And knock on wood, it's been good. Everybody's like, you need to check the weather. I'm like, I don't check the weather, because one thing I've learned is you can't control the weather.
No.
So somebody made a good point last year. They said, well, what happens if it rains?
Yeah.
And I said, well, you hope everybody says just keep our money. Now we all know that ain't going to happen, but that's sort of been thing. But I go back. You talk about these coaches, and Saban, man, the best to do it in my opinion in anything. It's like, what all these guys I've learned have in common, and I think when we're young head coaches or young bosses, they're not afraid to coach their best players the hardest. And that's when Kelvin Sampson walks into practice, he treats everybody the same. Bill Self, if you're not going to play hard, it don't matter how good you are, you're going to sit over there. And so I think that's a hard thing for people. I think sometimes people do get caught up in, hey, okay, I got to keep my best players happy. Well, those guys aren't worried about it. They know that, number one, there's a respect, because those players know when they walk in the gym that those guys are going to get everything out of them. And also they know that the coach isn't going to tolerate it, that if he didn't come in ready to work today, he's going to say, hey, man, you get out of here today. You ain't getting it done. And those guys will do that, those elite guys like that.
Last question. This is kind of a random question, but who's your all-time favorite basketball player? I think I know the answer, but...
I think it was probably myself when I played. I think that's why I was decent at times. But no, it's hey, everybody, I know this is a hot topic today especially, but I'm about winners, I'm about people that win. And, Michael Jordan, I mean, what he's done as a player, I mean, even if we talk about business, I mean, what he's done with his business, I mean, he is a hands-on guy with Jordan brand and Nike. And there's people out here buying his shoes. He can put a price tag for $1,000 on that thing, and somebody's going to buy them. So I was a Michael Jordan guy. I mean, it was amazing watching him. My son, he's 7, and so he's got into the Jordan shoes. Unfortunately, I mean, that's already cost me some good money. But he loves watching him. He likes watching Space Jam. He thinks that the Michael Jordan off Space Jam's the real Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
I was telling him, I was like, it'd be cool to, for these kids today to get to watch this guy. Because I said the thing about Jordan was he was a no-nonsense guy.
Yeah.
These guys today, they're awesome players. The game's obviously different. The world's different. But Michael Jordan was a guy, and I imagine that's why he's successful in the business world, like we just talked about with these really good head coaches too. When he stepped in between those lines, it was a no-nonsense. And if he was playing against Al Blanton, he was going to try to beat you 100-0. If he's playing against Jake Headrick, and he would have, 100-0. If he's playing against Karl Malone, he was going to try to beat them 100-0. So his mentality, his skill level, I think it's unmatched.
Man, I'm reading an awesome book right now. We went out to Colorado to see my brother-in-law and his family this past week, and I took a book on the plane. It's Showtime by Jeff Pearlman. It's about the Lakers dynasty, and it kind of walks you through. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Just giving you an inside look at Kareem and Magic and just the building of that dynasty. I don't know if you're if you read sports, books, but I would highly recommend that as well.
Yeah.
And talk about a guy that's also transitioned into the business world. Magic has been incredible.
Yeah.
Those guys, that generation of guys, I mean, to me, they're the greatest ever.
Hey, winning teams, man. People rally around winning teams. So yeah, I love that book. Hey, my favorite book is Talking to Goats by Jim Gray. Okay. You should look into that. Every chapter is about the GOAT, greatest of all time. Every is about every athlete that he thought was the greatest athlete in that sport. So a chapter about Tiger Woods, Mike Tyson, Jordan. He goes pretty in depth. So anybody out here that wants to read that, Talking to Goats is incredible.
I was just thinking, what are we the goats at? I may be the goat at talking. That may be,
My wife would say I'm a legend in my own mind. She always says he's a big fish from a small pond.
Sure.
I call her a hater for that. But anyways, yeah.
Well, one of the things that we do, it's a tradition we have, is we sign the poster. There aren't many spots left here. We've had about 50-something interviews. So if you don't mind, just sign it wherever you can find a spot.
Am I able to go inside the
man,
L right
go
here?
for
Okay,
it. I like
I'm going
it.
to start my own
I
deal
like
right
that.
here
Yeah,
then.
that's right. All right, man.
I'll still put my number
There
too.
you
I'll put my Bevel State number. I
There
think
you
I had
go.
a
Good.
you know, when you're not a very good player, they make you get a new number
Yeah.
every year. So I think I had 4 numbers in 4 years.
Yeah,
You know.
that's awesome. Well, man, we really appreciate you coming on the show, and you can have a seat. I think it's safe to say you've made Walker County very proud, all your accomplishments in coaching, and now what you're doing with Campio. And we just really appreciate you coming on, and it's really good to see you again.
Hey, you know, you never know what'll happen in life. I hope we'll be drawn back to this area one day because we miss it. I mean, we
Yeah.
love where we live now. Springfield. It's funny. I'll say Springfield reminds me of Walker County, and
Yeah.
I say that because you know my wife, I was telling you, works at Bass Pro. It's just a great company with
Yeah.
good, hard-working
Yeah.
people. O'Reilly Auto Parts' headquarters
Yeah.
are there, and
Yeah.
so Springfield is a blue-collar town.
Yeah.
But also with a lot of successful people.
Yeah.
And I think that's one reason we've
Yeah.
enjoyed it so much is because it reminds us of this area.
See, and you can do your job from anywhere, so just come on back, man.
No kidding, no kidding.
We appreciate it, Jake.
Thanks a lot.
For Jake Headrick, this is Al Blanton. Pick up the latest copy of 78 Magazine at a store near you, and we'll see you next time on The Lead. The Lead, sponsored by Lavish Boutique, Lavish Coffee, Jasper Veterinary Clinic, Jasper Bone and Joint, and Carl Cannon Chevrolet Buick GMC.